starting with the CDC situation, you were involved in a series of conversations and a meeting with the agency last year in the summertime, where you were advocating for change to how they describe defensive gun uses on their Fast Facts website, sort of the website where if somebody's going to Google CDC and defensive gun use, that's probably where they're going to end up in terms of, it gives you sort of a starting point, I think is supposed to be the idea. And the CDC initially resisted this idea, but then I guess was convinced to make this change. Why don't you just lay out in your own words what your concerns were with how the CDC had handled things previous to this?
I was brought in last, so I was what I call the second wingman. Although most of the articles regarding this issue have put me at the forefront of it, whatever, I can deal with that. But what the initial issue was that the CDC's numbers are not their numbers, but their paragraph addressed extrapolations on estimates of gun use, of defensive gun use. And I have no problem with that. I think that is a reasonable thing for them to do. I think where we had an issue, GVA, and where the GVP folks had an issue was that there were several numbers that were listed, and one was an outlier. The 2.5 million from Gary Kleck's study from 1993, much higher than everyone else. So we were concerned that it causes issues. And the reasoning for that is we would say if gun violence prevention folks were advocating and saying there needs to be some regulation for how things are, how we look at saving lives, then all of a sudden this $2.5 million defensive gun use number was thrown out, and it just stifled the conversation because it was like, oh my God, we're saving. Look how many lives we're saving, and our concern was that number has never been proven. That number has never once been critically looked at by the right-hand side of this discussion. Now, Harvard's looked at it. Johns Hopkins has looked at it. A lot of research PhDs have looked at this number, and they all consider it bad. They don't consider it a good number. It is, I think, I wrote it down, 41 times higher than the next set of numbers. So, so if you look at the three estimates, that the CDC had from 60,000 to 2.5 million, that is a 41 times spread. Now, if you were looking at numbers for polling, for whatever the issue is, you would have a question if something was such an outlier that it was 41 times higher. And that's all that we did. We were going, that number just it seems suspect. So why have it in there if it is suspect?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, obviously your criticism focused a lot on that 2.5 million number. And we will certainly get into the sort of statistical critiques that you guys had for why you don't like that estimate. But you're calling it an outlier there, and obviously there is a massive range between the 60,000 and 2.5 million. That is the range that the CDC gave on the website initially, and was part of the reason why the concerns that they expressed in comments about this. But when you say it's an outlier, there have been a number of other surveys that indicated between 1 million and 2.5 million defensive gun uses per year in the United States as well, including just recently one from Georgetown University professor William English that found 1.6 million among gun owners, people who identify as gun owners. So I guess, can you talk a little bit more about why you consider Gary Kleck's research particularly troubling, or do you just have a problem with all survey-based defensive gun use estimates?
No, not at all. I think that, that people use different methodologies. And so I have no problem with, let's look at the methodologies. And we'll talk about methodologies of what GVA does later, which is very much important to me. So what I look at is if a number is so far out of the range, and the other studies you're looking at, I would have to ask the question: have they been proved? Has anyone proven that number? Has anybody on the gun rights side take a critical look at those numbers? Now, they're numbers that make your argument easier, but if you don't look at them critically and you don't ask for proof on those numbers, you're starting to look at some issues of credibility, because you're picking up a number that you don't have any proof is even remotely correct.
Mm-hmm. And this was obviously what was articulated in those emails that we reported on from you and also from GVpedia founder
Devin Hughes.
Devin Hughes, yes. Apologies for his name slipped my mind for a moment. But this is the sort of main statistical critique of Gary Kleck's work, right? That if there were, and correct me if I'm getting this wrong, but the idea is if there were 2.5 million defensive gun uses per year, you should be able to verify some percentage of that through observable evidence like police reports or media reports. That's
sure. Yeah.
That's your basic argument, right?
Well, that's the basic argument of statistics. You should be able to prove X amount, Now, sometimes extrapolations work extremely well. If I'm trying to determine who's going to be the next president, I can tag 5,000 people. I can ask them what their point of view is, who they're going to vote for. And with a margin of error of about 2 or 3%, I can come up with a number that is fairly accurate. Now, if I look at a number that says there's a 4-point spread, and the next number says there's a 9-point spread, and the next one says there's a 1,400-point spread, you're going to be dubious of that 1,400-point spread. And that's all we're saying. We're not saying that academic research should not occur. We think that defensive gun use is an important variable that has to be looked at in this gun discussion that we're having nationally. But we just don't think that when you have a number that is an outlier, and it is, that's an issue.